Hello, friends. We're going to go over several topics in this episode. First one, Senate Republicans. Then we're going to get into the riots and some of what's been going on in Kenosha. Look at what the policymakers are talking about in regards to Antifa. Alright, so let's get into it. Look at this. We want names. GOP Senator Ron Johnson says committee Republicans blocking subpoenas for James Comey and John Brennan. That's right. Senate committee Republicans are blocking that testimony. Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Chairman Ron Johnson said Wednesday that Republicans on his committee blocked him from subpoenaing fired FBI Director James Comey and former CI Director John Brennan, and others involved in Spygate. Earlier this year, the committee gave Ron Johnson unilateral subpoena power. However, several members are now highly concerned about how it looks politically to subpoena Obama's goons. It is unclear how Ron Johnson is unable to issue subpoenas now after the committee already granted him the power to do so. So check this. He has full power to call these people to testify, but he's saying he can't because of Republicans. We had a number of my committee members that were highly concerned about how this looks politically, Johnson told conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt, who pressed the senator to name the Republicans blocking him. Ron Johnson refused to name names and said that he needs unanimous support from all committee Republicans in order to issue subpoenas. Even one GOP member objecting would result in a deadlock vote. If I lose one, I lose the vote, Johnson said. Hugh Hewitt repeatedly asked Ron Johnson to name the GOP members on the Senate Homeland Security Committee blocking his subpoenas. Johnson dug in his heels. Hugh, I'm just not going to be naming names that way, Johnson replied. If there's a senator who is blocking a subpoena, we need to know who that is so we throw them out, Hewitt said, pressuring Johnson to name the names. Which leads anybody with half a brain to a question. Well, who are the Republicans on his committee? Now, I'm going to eventually get looking into all of these names. But if only one has a problem with the subpoenaing, it's not going to happen. And when I look at this list, I see a little Mitt Romney problem. Now, the funny thing about this Gateway Pundit article is it didn't tell me who the Democrats were on the committee, but I wanted to know that too. And what do you know? None other than the vice presidential candidate for the Democrat Party, Kamala Harris, is on this committee also. It really makes one wonder, is Harris talking to Romney? When exactly does Romney decide to raise his hand and say, oh no, we can't call those people to testify? And when Ron Johnson's saying that people are saying they're concerned about how the politics will look, just whose politics are they worried about? I'm leaning towards Kamala Harris's politics. It looks like this snake, Mitt Romney, has caused more problems than we'll ever even know. But I'm going to go through these names and I'm going to dig into this story because we had the Senate committee that was ran by Republicans come out and support the intelligence dossier. And we all know that was completely bunk. The Republicans in the Senate are not getting things done. And I know people always say judges, judges, judges. But you have to understand Trump is picking those judges from a list that they gave him. There's some people in the Senate who need to go. But I would say, just as a start, Mitt Romney is number one. Guys, I know I keep going on and on about this tip report, right? But stick with me here. Just let me read you a few sentences out of this supposed prediction, and then let me show you a couple of quick video clips. First, here, last sentence. Trump team also encouraged chaos and violence in the streets and aimed to provoke Team Biden into subverting norms, even as Team Trump itself sabotaged traditional norms, so that Team Biden could be accused of hypocrisy or illegality. And then here, in addition, the exercises suggest that there is a significant possibility of simultaneous street mobilizations by both Trump and Biden supporters, in which case the possibility for violence will increase significantly, and the actions of law enforcement will become critical. Of note here, TIP's scenario exercise suggests that President Trump and his more fervent supporters have every incentive to try to turn peaceful Biden or anti-Trump protests violent in order to generate evidence that the Democratic Party is tantamount to mob rule. In recent past, President Trump has on numerous occasions called on the Second Amendment people to defend their rights and has called on his supporters to liberate states with restrictive CV-related rules. Trump can rely on surrogates to embed operatives inside protests to encourage violent action, and he can mobilize a range of law enforcement actors who might, without proper training or if led by politicized actors, escalate matters. In some scenarios examined by TIP, Team Trump succeeded in invoking the Insurrection Act and sending active duty troops into U.S. cities to restore order, protect voting places, or confiscate fraudulent ballots. Now, they've used 100 different things out of this TIP report in a coordinated effort against Trump and his supporters. But when I saw this from Andy No, I immediately knew they're starting to ramp up this aspect of the TIP report. And the aspect that I'm talking about is the aspect where the violence that's been going on for months and months will all of a sudden be exclusively because of Trump supporters, especially Trump supporters who have subverted Antifa. And guys, on this channel, we've been talking about how I dread the response if there's ever a clap back to all this. And just so you know, that wasn't it. That was just some good old boys who decided they would go mess with the Antifa protesters in Portland. And mess with them they did. Portland guys threw some ice bottles, some rocks, and some urine. And they got hit with some mace and some paintballs that I'm pretty sure had mace in them too. My point is, this is, quote, both sides, just like the TIP report was saying would happen. And if I'm seeing both sides being projected into the media now, then you can only imagine how much worse it's going to get. It's going to get bad. And while we're on the riots, let's talk about Kenosha for a minute. Seemed like a lot of people wanted to give Rand Paul a hard time when he said that most of the protesters in D.C. seemed like they were from out of state. But let's go look at what the Kenosha Police are saying about their rioters. This is from The Hill on August 31st. Kenosha Police say most arrested during protests were from out of town. Now let that sink in. The other day I was saying it would be easy for them to have a few figureheads from out of town controlling a local population. That's not what they're saying here. They're saying the majority of them were from out of town. Most people arrested during protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin have been from out of town, according to Kenosha Police. They arrested a total of 175 people between August 24, when protests erupted after the police shooting of Jacob Blake, and Sunday as of 12:30 p.m. Of the 175 arrests, 102 listed addresses from outside Kenosha. Arrest numbers include people from 44 different cities. Many arrests were for curfew violations, while others were charged with carrying concealed weapons, burglary, and possession of controlled substances. More than 20 firearms were seized, according to police. During a protest Tuesday night, 2 people were fatally shot and another was injured. Officials later arrested Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old from Illinois. He faces multiple charges in addition to first-degree intentional homicide. And Kenosha knew that these people were coming here. They knew that they were in their city. Because here on August 27, 2020, Kenosha Police arrest 9 occupants of suspicious out-of-state vehicles filling gas cans. Just watch this report.
Static video shows the arrest of what Kenosha Police are calling out-of-state troublemakers who planned on causing more destruction in Kenosha last night. Take a look. Cell phone video shows the arrest of several people inside a minivan near a gas station. Police say they were tipped off to several vehicles at that station filling gas cans. Unmarked squads swooped in, arrested 9 people. Inside, they found helmets, gas masks, illegal fireworks, among other things. Police say charges are pending.
And this is the only good news I can find out of this situation. If they're arresting out-of-state tags and they're coordinating like this, they're probably doing it with the Fed. And there's something else that leads me to think that the Feds might be looking at this too.
About Antifa. I don't think people really understand Antifa. And they say empirical and anecdotal evidence shows that Antifa is in fact highly networked, well-funded, has a global presence. It is a flat organizational structure with dozens and possibly hundreds of local groups. And by the way, the oldest group is in Portland. They say Antifa's stated long-term objective, both in America and abroad, and it got its birth in Europe, England, then Germany, then the United States, is to establish a communist world order. And by the way, this information is put out. It's not like we're conspiracy theorists or so forth. In the United States, Antifa's immediate aim is to bring down the demise of the Trump administration.
I think they would be, generally for bringing down any administration. They are a revolutionary group that is interested in some form of socialism, communism. They're essentially Bolsheviks. Their tactics are fascistic. And your description of them is consistent with what I've seen. And I think it's because of the desire for power, that the left wants power because that is essentially their state of grace and their secular religion. They want to run people's lives so they can design utopia for all of us, and that's what turns them on. And it's the lust for power, and they weren't expecting Trump's victory, and it outrages them.
And so Barr's talking about all the right things and seems to have a pretty good understanding of who the organization is. But of course, Barr seems to have a pretty good understanding of all the organizations I believe should get jail time. We'll just leave it at Barr has an understanding of Antifa. But somebody else talked about him too recently.
Facts. We're trying to get to the bottom of this story that the president has now told twice to reporters, that a person was on a plane, said there were 6 people dressed in black, filled with looters, rioters, anarchists, people looking for trouble. Do you know what he's talking about?
Well, I think what the president's referring to is actually what we heard in many of the cities. That I know in Detroit there were a large number of arrests several weeks ago, and the vast majority of people were from out of state. The same thing occurred in arrests that took place in recent cities. I mean, there's something going on here where the radical left, these anarchists and Antifa, are moving people around the country, and it's one of the reasons that the Justice Department is looking into where is the funding for this coming from. I think the American people can see what's happening here.
Or a charge against anybody funding this? I mean, it's been going on for some time. We haven't seen any Antifa arrests or people tied with the funding of this operation.
Well, that's actually not right, Brett. The Justice Department has overseen about 300 arrests.
Well, specifically, but not
since the violence has broken out in cities around the country. And we're going to continue to lean into that effort. We're going to make sure the American people know that we're going to work closely
on the
with state officials and law enforcement side, but we're vigorously investigating where this is being organized from. I remember when the rioting and the setting fire of buildings in Washington, D.C. was taking place, we actually heard that some organization was pre-positioning assets and resources around the city. And so I think people can see this is an organized effort in part. Some of it may be spontaneous, and the radical left certainly has its adherents in every city in the country. But we're looking to the Justice Department to get to the bottom of it.
And you saw Bret Baier, he challenged Pence there on that, and he said that although there's been 300 arrests, they haven't proved any coordination. And that's honestly what we're getting at here. That's the next level that Rand Paul was talking about yesterday, Barr is talking about, Pence is talking about, and of course the president is talking about. We want to see arrests of people at the next level. We want to see where this funding is coming from. And it seems like Trump team is starting to ask this question publicly. Regardless, everything I just showed you is a literal coming of life from the tip report. If you haven't read the tip report, please read it, spread it. It's what their plan is, and I'm watching it happen on the news, just like Event 201 and the CV. So we can add this to the Durham report in the category of waiting for things to happen, which, as a side note, is getting to be a kind of a annoyingly long list. What do you guys think? Are they going to get to the bottom of this? I don't know. Alright guys, well, PayPal and any ways to support will be the first comment down below, and the sources will be underneath that as usual. Like, share, sub the channel. Alright, I'm out of here guys.